Step away from the door. Now, you don't belong on this property.
This is my property. My name's on the plaque. I'm the owner.
I don't care. We got a call. Turn around. Hands where I can see.
The metal plaque beside the glass door caught the streetlight just as the officer's voice cut through the evening. You need to step away from this property right now. The man stopped, one hand still on his keyring, the other holding a leather briefcase worn soft at the edges. He looked at the officer, then at the plaque again. David R. Coleman, attorney at law. The same name stitched in small silver letters on the briefcase in his hand. This is my office, he said calmly. I'm the owner. The officer shifted his weight boots, scraping against the concrete sidewalk. It was 7:18 p.m., the end of a humid weekday traffic humming behind them, headlights washing the brick facade in white flashes. The building smelled faintly of dust and cleaning solution, the lobby lights already dimmed for the night. I don't care what you say, the officer replied. This is private property. You don't belong here. Step away from the door. David exhaled slowly. He had worked 14 hours that day. Depositions stacked back to back, a client crying quietly in the conference room over a wrongful termination case. He had stayed late to finish a brief due at midnight, the kind of work that kept the lights on and the rent paid. Now his key was inches from the lock, his name inches from proof, and none of it seemed to matter. My name is on the door, he said. I have the keys. I can show you the lease. I can show you the business registration. The officer's hand hovered near his belt. Not the gun, not yet, but close enough to be noticed. His jaw tightened. I've had complaints about suspicious individuals hanging around this building. You fit the description. Suspicious, how David asked. The question hung in the air unanswered. A couple walking past slowed down. A car idled at the corner, music thumping faintly through rolled-down windows. Somewhere above them, an air conditioning unit rattled to life. Sir, I'm giving you a lawful order, the officer said, his voice louder now. Step away from the property or you will be detained. David felt the familiar pressure settle in his chest, the one he had known since childhood, since being asked what he was doing in neighborhoods where he lived, buildings where he worked, spaces he had earned. He placed the briefcase on the ground carefully, deliberately, like a man handling evidence. I am a licensed attorney, he said. This is my law office. You are making a mistake. The officer stepped closer. Close enough that David could smell coffee on his breath, see the faint sheen of sweat under the brim of his hat. The space between them collapsed, charged and silent. Turn around and put your hands where I can see them, the officer said. Across the street, a phone was lifted, its camera lens glinting in the light. And just like that, what should have been an ordinary night of work became something else entirely. Years before that evening on the sidewalk, David R. Coleman learned what it meant to exist in spaces that questioned him. He grew up on the south side of Cleveland in a two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The machines ran late into the night, metal drums shaking the floor while he studied at the kitchen table. His mother worked double shifts as a nursing assistant. His father drove a city bus until his heart gave out when David was 16. College was not a given. It was a risk. David worked mornings at a warehouse loading trucks. Afternoons, he attended classes at a state university. Nights, he studied until his eyes burned. He was the first in his family to graduate. Law school came later, paid for with loans, scholarships, and a quiet, stubborn refusal to quit. He failed the bar exam the first time. He passed the second. The day he received his license, he sat alone in his car and cried until the steering wheel was slick with sweat and tears. He did not join a big firm. They did not call back. Instead, he opened a small practice in a converted brick building near downtown. Civil rights, employment law, police misconduct. The cases others avoided because they were messy, emotional, underpaid. He represented janitors fired without cause, tenants harassed out of their homes, young men charged on thin evidence. He won some, he lost others. What mattered was that he showed up. The office was modest. 2 rooms, 1 conference table, a desk scarred with old coffee rings. His name on the door meant something to him. It was proof that he belonged. Proof that the long nights and missed holidays had turned into something solid. The building owner knew him. The neighboring businesses knew him. His clients knew where to find him when everything else felt stacked against them. The officer had his own history, one that followed a different path, but led to the same moment. Mark Hensley joined the department straight out of the academy. He was 23, confident, praised for his command presence. Supervisors described him as proactive. He made stops. He asked questions. He wrote reports that sounded decisive. Over the years, complaints accumulated quietly. Improper detentions, discourteous conduct, a pattern that was never quite enough to trigger discipline. Each complaint ended the same way. Insufficient evidence, conflicting accounts, cleared. Training notes suggested he work on de-escalation. He nodded, he signed, he went back on patrol. The city rewarded numbers. Calls answered. Incidents closed. There was little incentive to slow down to question instincts shaped by repetition and unchecked authority. Mark learned which neighborhoods raised alarms, which faces matched vague descriptions. He learned that hesitation looked like weakness and confidence rarely got punished. He told himself he was keeping order. He told himself he could spot trouble. The badge reinforced that belief every time no one stopped him. The building on David's block had generated calls before. Trespassing, loitering, suspicious persons, most unfounded. Each one logged, each one reinforcing an idea that the area needed watching. That night, Mark responded alone. The radio crackled with a general description. Male, hanging around after hours, private property. When Mark pulled up, he saw a man near the door. Black, dressed professionally but tired. Briefcase, keys. The details that should have resolved the situation blended into the background noise of assumptions. He did not read the plaque. He did not ask the building manager. He did not pause. In his mind, the encounter fit a familiar script. Assert authority. Demand compliance. Move on. David's calm resistance felt like challenge. The presence of bystanders felt like pressure. Backing down felt impossible. What neither man said out loud was how much history stood between them. For David, every question about belonging echoed past moments of being stopped, followed, doubted. For Mark, every challenge to his authority felt like a test he could not afford to fail. The system had taught him that escalation was safer than retreat. The sidewalk did not know any of this. It only held the weight of two lives converging, one built through persistence and proof, the other through habit and unchecked power. The night air thickened as those paths collided, setting the stage for consequences neither could yet see. David bent down and picked up the briefcase again, not to leave, but to open it. He moved slowly, deliberately narrating each motion the way he had learned to do in courtrooms and police stations alike. I am opening my bag. I am taking out documents. His fingers slid past a legal pad and a thick case file until he pulled out a folded lease agreement, edges creased from use. This is the lease for this office, he said, holding it out. My name is on it. The address is the same door you are standing in front of. The officer did not reach for the paper. He glanced at it and shook his head. Anyone can print documents, he said. Step away from the building. David nodded once, absorbing the refusal. He reached into his pocket and produced a ring of keys, the metal clinking softly. He selected one and turned toward the door. Watch this, he said. The key slid into the lock. The mechanism clicked open with a sound too ordinary to be dramatic. The door moved inward a few inches before the officer stepped forward and blocked it with his boot. I told you to step away, the officer said. A woman across the street raised her phone higher. A delivery driver who had parked nearby leaned against his truck watching. Two men exiting a nearby restaurant slowed and stopped. The sidewalk was no longer empty. It had become an audience. David turned back, palms open. There are cameras inside, he said. Security cameras. The building manager can confirm. My business registration is filed with the state. My bar number is public record. You're being argumentative, the officer replied. His voice sharpened, edged with irritation. I'm investigating a complaint. A complaint of what David asked. He kept his tone even, but the question carried weight. What crime are you investigating? The officer did not answer directly. He shifted his stance, angling his body toward the growing cluster of onlookers. Sir, you are refusing to comply with a lawful order. A man from the restaurant spoke up. That sign has his name on it, he said. I've seen him here every day. The officer shot him a look. This does not concern you. The woman filming moved closer. Her phone was steady. You can see his name on the door, she said. Why are you doing this? The officer's jaw tightened. The crowd, instead of dissolving, solidified. Phones came out. Murmurs rippled through the group. The situation was no longer contained, and the officer felt it slipping from his control. David sensed the shift. He knew this moment. The one where logic had failed and ego took over. He held up a small card, now blue and white, worn at the corners. "This is my bar card," he said. "State issued. You can verify it right now." The officer waved it away. "Put that down." "I am not resisting," David said. "I am providing identification." The words resistance and compliance hovered between them, loaded and dangerous. The officer stepped closer again, voice rising just enough for the crowd to hear. "Turn around and face away from me." "On what grounds?" David asked. "For failing to obey a lawful order." David looked at the phones, the faces, the building behind him. He looked at his own name still visible on the plaque, catching the light. He felt the calculation begin in his mind, the same one he had advised clients to make. Escalate and risk injury, or worse. Or comply and fight later with evidence. He placed the bar card back in his wallet. "I am going to comply under protest," he said clearly. "I do not consent to this detention." The officer reached for his arm. The touch was firm, unnecessary. David did not pull away. Metal cuffs appeared cold against his wrists. The sound of them closing cut through the street noise, sharp and final. Someone in the crowd swore under their breath. The woman filming said his name out loud, reading it from the door. "David R. Coleman, that's his office." The officer ignored her. He guided David a few steps away from the entrance, positioning him so the building was now behind the line of his own body. The symbolism was not lost on anyone watching. "You're making a big mistake," David said quietly. The officer said nothing. His breathing was heavier now. The situation had gone too far to unwind. Admitting error in front of witnesses felt impossible. The safest path in his mind was forward. A second patrol car rolled up, lights flashing but no siren. Another officer stepped out, taking in the scene, the phones, the handcuffs, the name on the door. His eyes flicked to his partner, then to David. "What's going on?" he asked. "Suspicious person refusing to leave private property," the first officer said quickly. The second officer hesitated. He looked at the plaque. He looked at David. He looked at the crowd. David met his gaze. "This is my law office," he said. "I own it." The moment stretched. The crowd waited. Somewhere in that pause, the narrative began to crack. But the cuffs were already on the lines, already drawn. The escalation had reached a point where stopping now would require something the first officer did not yet have: the willingness to admit he was wrong. And so, the night pressed on heavier, louder, recorded from every angle, carrying everyone involved toward consequences that could no longer be avoided. The cuffs tightened with a small mechanical sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Metal on skin. Final and unforgiving. David felt the pressure settle around his wrists. Not painful yet, but firm enough to remind him that control had shifted. The officer guided him away from the door, one hand gripping his arm, steering him down the sidewalk as if the building behind them did not matter anymore. The plaque with David's name slipped out of view. The office lights glowed faintly through the glass, untouched, waiting. A space built by years of effort reduced to background scenery. "Walk," the officer said. David walked. Each step measured. He kept his shoulders back, his head level. He had advised clients to do the same. Do not resist. Do not argue. Let the record speak later. He repeated it silently now, not as legal strategy, but as survival instinct. The crowd followed at a distance. Phones stayed raised. The woman filming did not stop. Her breathing was audible as she walked. Someone asked for the officer's name. Someone else said this was wrong. The words blended together, forming a low, constant pressure behind them. At the curb, the patrol car waited. Its back door was already open. The interior smelled of disinfectant and old fabric, a sterile sharpness that filled David's nose as he was guided inside. The plastic seat was hard and molded, designed to be cleaned easily, designed not to comfort. The door closed. The sound was dull, heavy. Final again. David sat upright, wrists cuffed in front of him. He stared straight ahead through the metal cage, watching the officer move around the car, talking briefly with the second officer. Their voices were muted, indistinct. The streetlights flickered on fully now. Night had arrived. Inside the car, time stretched. David's mind moved quickly, cataloging details the way he had taught himself to do. Time of arrest, location, witnesses, the presence of video, the refusal to review documentation, the officer's statements. Each fact filed away precise and calm, even as something heavier pressed beneath it all. This should not have happened. Not here. Not like this. The car pulled away from the curb. The office disappeared from view, replaced by passing storefronts and red lights. The city moved on indifferent. Traffic noises filled the space. The radio crackled softly from the front seat, a dispatcher's voice cutting in and out. David watched the reflection of his own face in the darkened window. Older than he felt. Tired. Controlled. He thought of his mother who had told him years ago that respectability would protect him. Dress well, speak clearly, build something of your own. He had done all of it. None of it had mattered tonight. At a red light, the officer glanced back at him through the rearview mirror. Their eyes met briefly. The officer looked away first. They arrived at the station under fluorescent lights that washed everything in pale blue. The door opened. Cool air rushed in. David was guided out past a bench, past a vending machine, humming softly. The cuffs clicked again as they adjusted his grip tighter now. Inside the booking area, another officer looked up. "What do we have?" he asked. "Suspicious person refusing to leave private property," the arresting officer said. "Failure to comply." The desk officer's eyes moved to David. He took in the suit jacket, the calm posture, the way David held himself. He hesitated for half a second, just long enough to be noticed. "Sir, do you have any identification?" he asked. "Yes," David said. "My wallet is in my jacket pocket. I am an attorney. The office you removed me from is mine." The arresting officer cut in. He refused lawful orders. David said nothing more. He had learned when to stop speaking. He focused instead on the sounds around him. Keys clinking, a printer spitting out paper, distant laughter from somewhere deeper in the building, the ordinary rhythm of a place that processed people every day. As his belongings were logged, the reality of the situation settled deeper. This was not a misunderstanding anymore. It was a record, a report, a version of events written by someone else and less challenged. The arresting officer completed paperwork with quick strokes of a pen. His hand moved confidently, practiced. But there was something new now, a stiffness, a pause between lines. The crowd, the video, the second officer's hesitation. All of it lingered. David was led to a holding area, seated alone. The bench was cold. The walls were scuffed. He closed his eyes briefly, not in despair, but in focus. The plan was already forming. Calls to make. Motions to file. Evidence to preserve. Down the hall, the officer stood still for a moment, paperwork in hand. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a tight unease he could not quite name. He had acted. He had asserted authority. But the certainty he usually felt was missing. For the first time that night, the imbalance began to shift. Slowly. Quietly. Not yet visible, but inevitable. The holding area door opened without ceremony. A different officer stepped inside. Older, slower in his movements. Eyes already scanning before he spoke. He looked at David's cuffs first. Then at his face. Then at the clipboard in his hand. "David R. Coleman," he said. "Yes." The officer paused. Just long enough. He turned and walked back down the hall without another word. Minutes passed. Then more. The noise of the station continued around David, phones, ringing footsteps, muted conversations. Time stretched again, but the tension had changed. Something was happening out of sight. When the door opened the second time, it was not the arresting officer who appeared. It was a Lieutenant Gray at the Temple's uniform pressed sharp. A watch commander. The kind of presence that made rooms adjust their volume instinctively. "Mr. Coleman," the lieutenant said, "please come with me." The cuffs stayed on as they walked, but no one rushed him now. Officers looked up from desks as they passed. One recognized the name from the booking screen and frowned. Another leaned back in his chair, suddenly interested. They stopped outside a small office with frosted glass. Inside, the arresting officer stood rigidly near a desk. His posture was straight, but his jaw worked as if he were chewing something sour. The lieutenant closed the door behind them. "Sir," the lieutenant said to David, "are you the owner of the law office at 214 West Madison?" "Yes." "Do you practice civil rights law?" "Yes." "Do you represent clients in cases involving police misconduct?" "Yes." The arresting officer shifted his weight. The lieutenant nodded once. He turned to the computer on the desk and typed. The keys clicked loudly in the quiet room. He pulled up a state database, then another. Business registration. Bar association records. Property lease information. Each screen loaded without resistance. David R. Coleman, licensed attorney, active status, office address confirmed. The lieutenant leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Officer Hensley," he said, "have you verified any of this information before making the arrest?" The officer swallowed. He looked at the floor. He looked at the wall. He did not look at David. He was refusing to comply, the officer said. "I had a complaint." A complaint does not override ownership, the lieutenant replied. A name on a door is not suspicious behavior. The officer's face changed. The color drained first, then the certainty. The confidence that had fueled the arrest collapsed inward, replaced by something sharp and panicked. Sir, the lieutenant said to David, I am going to remove the cuffs. The metal clicked open. The pressure disappeared. David rotated his wrist slowly, feeling blood return. Red marks circled his skin, already darkening. You are not being charged with anything, the lieutenant continued. This detention should not have occurred. David nodded once. I would like copies of all reports, body camera footage, dispatch logs, and any civilian video collected tonight. The lieutenant did not hesitate. You will have them. The arresting officer stared now. His breathing was shallow. He had realized it. Not just that he was wrong, but that this was the wrong kind of wrong. The kind that did not disappear into paperwork. The lieutenant turned back to him. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. The words landed hard, final, career-altering. Sir, the officer began. Not now, the lieutenant said. David picked up his jacket and wallet from the desk. He stood straighter than before, not in defiance, but in clarity. The room felt smaller. The power dynamic had inverted completely. As they walked back toward the front of the station, officers watched openly now. Whispers followed. Phones vibrated as messages moved faster than policy ever could. At the exit, the lieutenant stopped. Mr. Coleman, he said quietly, I apologize. David looked at him. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were sharp. This was not a mistake, he said. This was a choice. Outside, the night air hit differently. Cooler, cleaner. Across the street, the woman who had been filming was still there. She lowered her phone when she saw him free, then raised it again. David stepped onto the sidewalk. He looked back once at the building. Inside, Officer Hensley stood frozen in a room where certainty had vanished, staring at a career unraveling in real time. The truth had surfaced. Slowly, methodically, irrefutably. And now there would be consequences. The lawsuit was filed 11 days later, 46 pages single, spaced precise and unforgiving. David did not rush it. He reconstructed the night minute by minute, supported by video from 3 bystanders, body camera footage, dispatch audio, and internal timestamps pulled from the department's own systems. Every claim was anchored. Unlawful detention, false arrest, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, retaliation for protected speech, racial profiling under color of law. The city attorney's office received the complaint on a Monday morning. By noon, the video was already circulating online. The clip of David standing in front of his own office, his name visible inches from the officer's hand, spread faster than the written allegations ever could. Within 24 hours, it passed 1 million views. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. Comment sections filled with the same sentence repeated in different forms. It was his office. Local news picked it up first, then state outlets, then national. Headlines were blunt. Black attorney arrested outside his own law office after officer orders him off private property. Civil rights groups released statements. Bar associations demanded answers. Law professors broke down the footage frame by frame, pointing out each moment where the encounter should have ended. The department placed Officer Mark Hensley on unpaid suspension pending investigation. Internal Affairs reopened every prior complaint in his file. Patterns emerged quickly once someone actually looked. Disproportionate stops. Repeated confrontations escalating from minor encounters. Warnings buried under language like training opportunity and no policy violation found. The union issued a statement defending due process. It did not age well. As the case moved forward, discovery became unavoidable. Emails surfaced showing supervisors aware of concerns but reluctant to act. Performance reviews praising assertiveness while noting community complaints without consequence. Training records signed, but never meaningfully enforced. David gave one interview. He did not raise his voice. He did not editorialize. He described facts. What mattered was not who he was, he said, but that the system failed even when the proof was literally on the door. The city requested mediation. David declined. He wanted depositions. He wanted sworn testimony. He wanted the record built so it could not be ignored or quietly settled away without accountability. Officer Hensley's deposition lasted 7 hours. He watched the video in silence. When asked why he did not read the plaque, he said he did not recall seeing it. When asked why he ignored the lease and the key, he said people can fake documents. When asked why he escalated in front of witnesses, he said he felt challenged. That answer followed him. Internal Affairs completed its investigation 2 months later. The findings were direct. The arrest lacked probable cause. The detention violated department policy. The officer failed to verify readily available information. The escalation was unjustified. Prior complaints demonstrated a pattern of conduct inconsistent with constitutional policing. Termination was recommended. The department chief signed the letter the same day. Officer Mark Hensley was fired for cause. His certification was referred to the state licensing board. His name was entered into the National Decertification Database. His law enforcement career ended without ceremony, without appeal. The city settled the lawsuit 3 weeks later. The amount was not symbolic. $785,000. No admission of wrongdoing as the statement read, but the number said what the language would not. The settlement agreement included mandatory policy changes. Required verification before trespass arrests. Body camera review protocols. Bias training tied to performance evaluation. Early warning thresholds that could no longer be ignored. David donated a portion of the settlement to a legal defense fund for people wrongfully detained. He used the rest to expand his practice. Another attorney hired. Another office opened. More clients served. The night that nearly erased his work instead amplified it. Officer Hensley disappeared from public view. His name surfaced briefly when his termination became final. Then again when his certification was revoked. After that silence. A career built on unchecked authority ended not with a trial but with documentation. The video remains online. It is used in training sessions now, replayed in classrooms, paused at the moment where a name on a door should have been enough. The lawsuit did more than end a career. It forced a reckoning the department could no longer avoid. Data reviewed, practices questioned, quiet habits exposed. David still locks up late some nights. He still walks out to the sidewalk alone. The plaque is still there, polished now, lit more brightly than before. His name has not changed. What changed was the record, and the understanding that proof once ignored can become consequence when someone refuses to let it disappear. What happened on that sidewalk was not a gray area. The law is clear, even when behavior is not. A police officer may not detain a person without reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. Standing outside your own place of business, holding keys, unlocking the door, is not a crime. It is ordinary conduct protected by the Fourth Amendment. Trespass requires lack of lawful authority to be present. Ownership of valid lease or legal control over property defeats any claim of trespass instantly. In this case, verification was available within seconds. A name on a door, a key in a lock, public business records. The failure was not legal ambiguity, it was refusal to verify. Equally important is what the law says about compliance. Refusing to leave property you lawfully occupy is not obstruction. Asking why you are being detained is not resistance. Asserting constitutional rights does not create probable cause. Courts have ruled this repeatedly across jurisdictions for decades. Escalation based on perceived disrespect is not lawful policing. This case also illustrates how bias operates in practice. Bias does not announce itself. It disguises itself as intuition, suspicion, experience. It fills in gaps when evidence is thin and justifies escalation when authority feels challenged. The officer did not say race out loud. He did not need to. His assumptions did the work for him. For civilians, there are practical lessons here. If you are confronted on property you lawfully occupy, remain calm. State your status clearly. Do not argue endlessly. Provide verification once if it is safe to do so. If an officer refuses to verify and escalates, prioritize your safety. Compliance under protest preserves your ability to challenge the encounter later. If possible, ensure the encounter is recorded. Your own phone, a bystander, a security camera. Video does not replace justice, but it makes denial harder. Remember names, badge numbers, time, and location. Ask for a supervisor if the situation allows. Do not consent to searches you do not legally owe but do not physically interfere. For officers, this story is a warning written in policy and consequence. Authority without verification is liability. Escalation without cause is exposure. A badge does not override property law. Confidence does not replace investigation. Every unlawful detention creates a record that does not fade, especially in an era where witnesses carry cameras. For departments, the lesson is structural. Patterns matter. Complaints dismissed individually often form clear trends when examined together. Early intervention is not optional if constitutional policing is the goal. Training without accountability is theater. Policy without enforcement is permission. And for everyone watching, the final lesson is this: professional success does not immunize anyone from bias. Ownership does not guarantee belonging in the eyes of power. Rights only matter when they are enforced, documented, and defended. The name on the door was proof all along. It was ignored until it became evidence. If this could happen to a civil rights attorney at his own office, it can happen to anyone without his resources, knowledge, or platform. That is why these stories matter. Not for outrage, but for clarity. Know your rights, document violations, demand verification, and never accept the idea that compliance should cost you your dignity. What would you have done in David's position? Would you have complied? Would you have challenged it later? Or would you have expected the system to correct itself without pressure? Comment below.